Dewey Decimal mean anything to you?
I've heard of Dewey Moore.
Ah, the Idaho backcountry. Who doesn't want to fly there? This certainly isn't the end-all instructional video to fly to the Frank Church Wilderness area, but it will get you in the right frame of mind. It's a good idea to study all the charts and maps you can find before you head out. Figure out where there's fuel and where the mountains are along your route. All this kind of stuff is important, but you can also ask around. Reach out to those with experience.
So you're not going too far off.
They got class Delta up to like 7,800 feet right there.
Okay.
Which you're usually that high anyway. But if you just go up this valley and then you kind of pop out over Ketchum into this valley, this is Galena Summit. You got to be like 9 to 9.5 to get over it.
Okay.
That's the highest spot on the whole route. And then it's just downhill. You're over Smiley Creek pretty high coming over the summit, and then just downhill. And I just dive right into the canyon, over Sulphur Creek, over this little hump landmark, and down the canyon. That's the way I go.
Know what you will need for the trip. What to pack is up to you. You'll definitely want tie-downs for Johnson Creek and the many stops along the way.
And here we have the wild dingbat in his natural habitat.
We have a perfectly good $60,000 airplane out in the High Plains Desert.
And if you learn how to tie a good knot, your Johnson Creek neighbor will sleep better. During the main flying season at Johnson Creek, there is a caretaker there, and you can actually ship your baggage there UPS if need be. You might not need a sleeping bag and extra water traveling through Ohio, but you sure as heck ought to have them and other emergency provisions while cruising through the more remote areas of the Wild West. The unthinkable happens to the best of us. We're going to try to get to an aeroport, and rumor has it a man named Bruce has an extra radiator in Douglas, Wyoming. Small airplanes handle different when they're all loaded up. With many factors stacked against us on our last trip to Johnson Creek, we ditched the belly pod and much of our baggage in Stanley. Because even in the fall, density altitude's a bitch. We're just taking the bare bones.
This stuff?
I need the contacts and the toothpaste. No, I don't need that thing. That's what we're leaving behind. We don't need this stuff either. Just the cameras and the batteries. And duct tape. We need duct tape. I need that. Make sure the pilot is up to the task. That's you. Be current. Some people suggest that us flatlanders do some stalls at 9,000 feet before heading out west. It's not uncommon for the density altitude to be that high in the summer at some of these backcountry strips. And if you usually operate on pavement, go find some unimproved strips and get comfy with the dirt and the grass. Your plane will fly just fine with dust on it. Trust me. As your departure date approaches, obsess about the weather. Check it often. Map your route and check out the weather for cities along the way. You can start watching the radar a day or two beforehand and see what's creeping in. Be ready to scrap plan B and C and bail on the whole trip. With small airplanes, you have to roll with the punches. Enjoy the punches. It's part of the adventure. Density altitude is no joke. No matter how cocky I get back home in Ohio with the steep hills and the postage stamp runways, I'm always humbled in the rugged, unforgiving backcountry of Idaho. It's best to fly in the morning with the calm, cool air. If you don't like the way the air feels, don't be afraid to stop at the nearest airport and wait. Wait it out until the next morning. Try it again. Nobody said it would be easy. This plane fully loaded back home off of the farm will take off in about 300 feet. This is what it looks like at Smiley Creek, with a density altitude of about 9,500 feet. There's a lot of room for error when your tires are in contact with the ground that long. You might encounter sinking air and violent turbulence. Your plane might not perform like it does back home, and you might find yourself in a labyrinth of canyons. It's pretty easy to make a wrong turn and find yourself in what they call a box canyon, which sucks. There are other tricks to think about before you head out, like figuring out which side of the ridge is going to have the sink and which side's going to have the lift, and how low is too low to cross a ridge on a windy day. You kinda have to experience it yourself to understand what all the talk is about. The rewards of doing this stuff is so much greater than the risk for a lot of us, otherwise we wouldn't repeatedly do it. I don't like sounding like a fearmonger, but know that the risks are real. Give yourself a larger buffer for error than you do back home. During the summer months, communication becomes very important in the Frank Church Wilderness area. You might think you're alone out there, but you're not. It's bustling with aviators. Keep your eyes peeled for traffic. Plug all the right frequencies in. And listen. Have good radio etiquette. Don't pollute the frequency with banter. Someone might really need to say something important somewhere. A large area is using that same frequency. And when you say where you are, it's best to use miles and altitudes.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cessna 0 Alpha Whiskey, 10 South, 6,500, inbound landing Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cub 4 Golf Sierra, 7 Northwest at 8,500, full stop, Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cessna 0 Alpha Whiskey, 5 South, be entering left downwind for runway 17, Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cub 4 Golf Sierra, over Yellow Pine at 8,500, will be entering left upwind 17, Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cessna 0 Alpha Whiskey, left downwind for runway 17, Johnson Creek.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cub 4 Golf Sierra is left upwind, crossing midfield for 17, have downwind traffic in sight.
Johnson Creek traffic, Cessna 0 Alpha Whiskey, base to final.
We've oversimplified things in the example, but you get the point. During a fly-in, there will be much chatter on the radio, and you might be fighting to say something. Keep it short, but comprehensible. If you get nervous with all the traffic, there's a very long strip 20 miles south of Jay Creek called Landmark. You can land there and stretch your legs and regroup. You could even make a radio call for advice. Someone might even offer to escort you in from there. Pilots help pilots. That's the name of the game. If you talk to a good mentor before you depart, you could arrange to meet them in McCall and go in as a group. On final, it's okay to snake around the canyon to bleed off a little altitude. It's common for Johnson Creek virgins to fly high approaches. The canyon's a lot bigger than it looks. As long as you're not too far off, there's enough room for a plane on the upwind and a plane on final to snake around the canyon, so don't freak out. We might feel like we're close to the ground because these trees outside our windows are so close, but the mountaintops surrounding the runway are over 3,000 feet higher than the runway. As you know, a common pattern is about 1,000 feet, so if you're trying to stay out of the canyon until your base leg, you're going to end up burning up half of the runway, even in a mean slip. So if you're used to large 747 style patterns, practice at home keeping it a little tighter, and imagine mountains all around. And don't worry, nobody will judge you at Johnson Creek. And once you've figured out how to land... So this place is like hustle and bustle and crazy most of the time? With like 100 airplanes there and about 50 right there. Don't just cruise up and down 2 miles an hour so everybody sees you. Get out of the runway, it's a freaking runway, man. This would hardly be a Jay Creek instructional video if I didn't mention the White House. The White House. They probably like airplanes a little or they wouldn't live there, but after 100 buzz jobs in a day, you'd get over it too. So respect their space if you can. Once you've made it all the way to Johnson Creek, you don't really need to explore. But if you're hell-bent on seeing some of the nuttier strips, flyouts are a great place to get started on that endeavor. Each morning, pilots fly out to their favorite backcountry strips to fish, eat breakfast, or just take in the beauty. Likely, there will be someone at Johnson Creek to take you under their wing. When breaking off to the less traveled strips, it's helpful to use upstream and downstream to indicate your direction of travel. Runway headings and approaches are not that straightforward sometimes in the backcountry. Like here at Dewey Moore, we are traveling upstream against the water. So we could say,
Area traffic, Cub 4 Golf Sierra, currently a half-mile downstream of Dewey Moore, landing.
you can talk upstream and downstream with the brain power sitting around Johnson Creek in the afternoons and evenings. There's a lot of useful information floating around, and that's the opportune time to not only ask questions, but to get hooked up with a mentor. Well, I certainly hope your journey to Johnson Creek is as fun as ours have been. I hope you get to see the town of Yellow Pine, meet some cool people. I hope you get to play some horseshoes. Hopefully you slept well, and the weather was great. Good luck on your journey home. Fly safe.